The words sliced through the air like a blade. Take me home tonight, or don't bother coming back Monday. Brennan Calloway stood frozen at the bar of the Obsidian Lounge, Chicago's most exclusive after-work destination. The amber lighting that had seemed warm and inviting just moments ago now felt suffocating, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't shake. His boss, Vivian Hartwell, leaned against him. The CEO of Hartwell and Associates Architecture, a woman who commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors, now swayed unsteadily, her breath sharp with whiskey, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his forearm. Around them, the last stragglers from the company happy hour had filtered out into the Chicago night. The bartender polished glasses at the far end of the counter, carefully avoiding eye contact. Brennan was alone with a woman who held his entire life in her hands. 5 years. He had worked at this firm for 5 years, building a reputation through late nights and brilliant designs, through dedication that never wavered even when his personal life crumbled around him. 5 years of flexible hours that let him rush to his daughter's medical appointments. 5 years of health insurance that covered 80% of medications, costing over $4,000 every single month. And now in 60 seconds, it was all crumbling to dust. Mrs. Hartwell, Brennan said carefully, keeping his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. You've had a difficult evening. Let me call you a car service. There's an excellent one that can be here in 10 minutes. I didn't build this company by accepting rejection. Vivian's eyes hardened despite their glaze. Even drunk, even desperate, there was steel beneath her words. I've seen how you look at me in meetings, Brennan. The admiration, the respect. Don't pretend this isn't mutual. I respect you as my employer. That's where it ends. He tried to step back, but her grip tightened. I need to get home to my daughter. The word landed like a slap. Your daughter. Vivian's voice turned cold, each syllable dripping with something that sounded almost like hatred. Always your excuse for everything. The deadline extensions because she had a bad night. Leaving early every Thursday for her appointments. Turning down the Shanghai project because you couldn't travel. She stepped closer, and Brennan could see the mascara smudged beneath her eyes, the careful facade cracking. Maybe it's time the firm had someone more committed. Someone who doesn't treat this job like a convenience. Brennan felt the blood drain from his face. His mind raced through calculations he had made 1,000 times before. Without this job, his insurance would end in 30 days. Lily Rose's next treatment cost $12,000. His savings account held $3,400.16. Not enough. Not nearly enough. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands, grateful for any interruption. A text from his sister Wren. The words blurred, then sharpened into terrible clarity. Rosie's fever spiked to 102.4. She's asking for you. Should I give emergency meds? The timing was devastating. His 8-year-old daughter, fighting a rare autoimmune disease that turned her own body against itself, needed him right now. Not in an hour. Not after he figured out how to navigate this nightmare. Now. But Vivian stood between him and the exit, her hands still gripping his arm like she owned him, like she had the right. I have to go, Brennan said, showing her the message. His voice cracked on the words. My daughter is sick. She needs me. Something flickered across Vivian's face. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and Brennan saw something underneath that looked almost like recognition, almost like pain, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, buried beneath layers of alcohol and armor. Fine. Off. She released his arm, stepping back. Go running to your precious daughter. Brennan turned toward the door, relief flooding through him. But if you walk out that door, Vivian's voice followed him like a curse. Don't bother coming in Monday. I'll make sure you never work in architecture again. Every firm in Chicago will know your name, and none of them will touch you. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he might waver. He might calculate the cost of his dignity against the price of his daughter's medicine. He might make a choice he could never live with. Brennan pushed through the heavy oak doors and into the cool October night. The Chicago wind hit his face like absolution, clearing the fog of whiskey and desperation from his lungs. Behind him, through the closing door, he heard something that might have been a sob, but he was already running. The drive to Wren's apartment passed in a blur of street lights and spiraling thoughts. Brennan's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. Without his job, he would lose insurance in 30 days. He could apply for COBRA, but the premiums would triple, eating through his savings in 2 months. He could look for another position, but architecture firms talk to each other, and if Vivian followed through on her threat, his name would be poison. He could sell his car, move to a cheaper apartment, take on freelance work at night. None of it would be enough. None of it would cover $12,000 a month for the treatments keeping his daughter alive. His phone rang through the car's speakers. An unknown number with a Chicago area code. Something told him to answer. Mr. Calloway, a woman's voice, older, cultured, with an undertone of urgency. My name is Genevieve Hartwell. I believe you work for my daughter. Brennan nearly swerved into oncoming traffic. Genevieve Hartwell, the legendary founder of the firm, Vivian's mother, who had supposedly retired 7 years ago to travel the world. But she still held controlling shares. She still had the power to override any decision her daughter made. I need to speak with you tomorrow morning, Genevieve continued. It's about Vivian and an explanation you deserve. How do you know what happened tonight? A pause. When Genevieve spoke again, her voice carried the weight of years. The bartender at Obsidian is an old friend. He's called me on this date before. Another pause, heavier this time. This isn't the first time, Mr. Calloway, but I pray it will be the last. The call ended, leaving Brennan with more questions than answers. He pulled into Wren's driveway and killed the engine, sitting in the darkness for one long moment. Tomorrow he would face whatever secrets Genevieve Hartwell wanted to reveal. Tomorrow he would figure out how to save his career, his home, his daughter's future. But tonight only one thing mattered. Inside the apartment, Brennan found his daughter curled on the couch, her small body trembling beneath layers of blankets despite the warm room. Her dark hair was damp with fever sweat, plastered to her forehead. Her cheeks were flushed and angry red. But when she saw him, her eyes lit up like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Daddy, you came. Always Rosie, bud. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her, pressing his palm to her forehead. Still warm, but not as scorching as he had feared. I'll always come when you need me. Wren appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face drawn with worry. She was 30 years old but looked older tonight, the stress of the past few hours carved into the lines around her eyes. She had moved to Chicago 2 years ago specifically to help with Lily Rose, giving up a promising therapy practice in Portland because family came first. 101.9 now, she mouthed silently. Going down. Brennan nodded his thanks and turned back to his daughter. Daddy? Rosie's voice was small, made smaller by illness. Am I going to be sick forever? The question shattered something inside him. He stroked her hair, fighting to keep his voice steady, fighting to be the anchor she needed. We're going to fight this together, sweetheart. You and me. That's what Callaways do. We fight. Like superheroes. Better than superheroes. Because our power is love. And love never runs out. Rosie considered this with the gravity only a child facing adult challenges could muster. Ms. Patterson says love is the strongest power in all the stories, even stronger than dragons. Ms. Patterson is very wise. She also says, Rosie continued, her voice growing drowsy as the fever broke and exhaustion claimed her, that sometimes the scary people are just sad people wearing armor. so nobody can hurt them more. Brennan's breath caught in his throat. He thought of Vivian, her mascara-smeared eyes, that flash of something painful beneath her cruelty. Where did you learn to be so smart, Rosebud? I don't know. A yawn. Maybe from being sick. You notice things when you're lying down a lot. You watch people more. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of peaceful rest. Brennan sat beside her on the floor, his back against the couch, his hand wrapped around her small fingers. Tomorrow, everything might fall apart. Tomorrow, he might lose his job, his insurance, his ability to keep his daughter alive. Tomorrow, he would meet with Genevieve Hartwell and learn whatever terrible truth she had to share. But tonight, his daughter was safe. Tonight, her fever was breaking. Tonight, they were together. It would have to be enough. The tea room was called the Gilded Iris, tucked away on a quiet street far from Chicago's downtown bustle. Brennan had never heard of it, which was probably the point. Old money kept its secrets in places ordinary people never found. Genevieve Hartwell sat at a corner table, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture perfect despite her 68 years. She wore a simple navy dress that probably cost more than Brennan's monthly rent, and her eyes, when they met his, held a grief so deep it seemed bottomless. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Calloway." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit." Brennan sat. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," Genevieve said. "You deserve the truth, and the truth is painful. I ask only that you hear me out before you judge my daughter." "I'm listening." Genevieve reached into her purse and withdrew a photograph, sliding it across the white tablecloth. Brennan picked it up, and his breath caught. A younger Vivian smiled up at him from the glossy paper. But this wasn't the cold, calculating CEO he knew. This woman glowed with joy, her arm wrapped around a handsome man with kind eyes, her head thrown back in laughter. On the man's shoulder sat a little girl, perhaps 3 years old, with Vivian's dark hair and a smile that could light up continents. "Her husband, Jonathan," Genevieve said softly. "Her daughter, Emmeline. Emmy, we called her." Brennan stared at the photograph, something cold settling in his stomach. 5 years ago today," Genevieve continued, "they were driving home from Emmy's ballet recital. A drunk driver crossed the median." The words hung in the air, terrible in their simplicity. "Jonathan died on impact. Emmy lived for 3 hours in the hospital, with Vivian holding her hand, before her injuries proved too severe." Genevieve's voice cracked, but she pressed on. Vivian had stayed late at the office that night. If she had been in the car, perhaps she could have swerved in time. Perhaps she could have saved them. She has never forgiven herself. Brennan set the photograph down. His hands were trembling. "Emmy would have been 8 this year," Genevieve said. "The same age as your Lily Rose. She would have been in 3rd grade. She loved butterflies and hated broccoli and asked why about everything." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Vivian's fixation on his daughter, her cruelty wrapped around that specific word, the way she had seemed to recognize something in him, some devotion that reminded her of everything she had lost. "Every year on the anniversary," Genevieve explained, "Vivian breaks. She drinks to forget because the pain is too much to carry sober, and the alcohol transforms her into someone unrecognizable. Someone who wants others to feel what she feels. Someone desperate to make the world as dark as the place she lives inside." "That's terrible." Brennan chose his words carefully. "Truly, but it doesn't excuse threatening my livelihood. My daughter's health depends on this job." "No, it doesn't excuse it." Genevieve's gaze was unflinching. "Nothing could, which is why I'm here to make things right." She outlined her proposal with businesslike efficiency. Using her controlling shares, she would override any termination Vivian attempted. Brennan's position would be protected. His insurance would continue. His daughter would receive the treatments she needed. But I'm asking something in return, Genevieve said. Meet with Vivian today. Give her the chance to apologize. Why should I? Because she woke this morning with no memory of what happened at the bar. She never remembers these episodes. When I told her what she said to you, what she threatened, she was horrified. Brennan thought of Vivian's face in that moment when her mask had slipped, that flash of pain beneath the cruelty. She's drafted her resignation, Genevieve continued. She believes she's unfit to lead, and perhaps she's right. But her final act as CEO will directly affect your daughter. You deserve to hear it from her. That afternoon, Brennan entered Vivian's corner office at Hartwell and Associates. The space looked different from his previous visits, stripped of personal touches and half filled with packing boxes. Photographs had been removed from walls, leaving rectangular ghosts of lighter paint. Vivian stood at the window, her back to the room, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline. When she turned, Brennan barely recognized her. The polished CEO had vanished. This woman looked hollowed out, her eyes swollen from crying, her designer suit replaced by simple black clothes. She looked like she was attending a funeral. Perhaps in her mind she was. I don't expect forgiveness, Vivian said. Her voice was raw, scraped clean of artifice. I don't deserve it. I just need you to know that the woman who spoke to you last night is not who I want to be. She's the monster I become when the grief gets too heavy to carry. Then why do you let her out? The question hung between them, brutal in its simplicity. Because some nights the pain is too much to bear sober, and when I drink, I become something that doesn't feel that pain anymore. She paused. But that something spreads pain to everyone around it instead, like poison, like a disease I can't cure. She told him about Jonathan, about Emmy, about the drunk driver who walked away with minor injuries while her family burned, about 3 years of therapy that couldn't fill the emptiness, about 2 failed stints in rehabilitation that only taught her to hide her drinking better. Your daughter, Vivian said, her voice cracking on the word. When you talk about her in meetings, the way your eyes change, the way your whole body shifts toward hope, it reminds me of everything I lost. I think some part of me wanted to destroy that, to drag you into the darkness with me, to make you understand what it feels like when the universe tears away everything you love. That's monstrous. Yes, it is. Vivian walked to her desk and picked up a folder, extending it toward him. My resignation is effective immediately. The board will announce it Monday. But before I go, I push through one final executive decision. Brennan opened the folder. The words swam before his eyes, then crystallized into impossible meaning. A new company policy. Comprehensive medical coverage for all employees with children suffering from chronic conditions. 0 copay, no coverage caps, retroactive to the first of last month. Your daughter's treatments will be fully covered, Vivian said. Every medication, every hospital visit, every specialist, for as long as you work here. Why? The word came out strangled. After everything? Because I saw myself in you, Brennan, a parent who would sacrifice anything for their child, who would work any job, endure any humiliation, fight any battle. I just forgot what that really meant until I became the threat trying to take it away. She turned back to the window. My Emmy loved butterflies, she said softly. She would have been exactly Lily Rose's age. She would have started 3rd grade this September. She would have made friends and scraped her knees and asked a million questions I'll never get to answer. For the first time, Brennan saw Vivian not as his tormentor, but as a broken mother standing in the ashes of her former life. I don't forgive you, he said finally. Not yet, but I understand grief, and I hope you find your way through it. Vivian didn't turn around. I'm not sure I deserve to. Maybe deserving isn't the point. Maybe you just keep trying anyway. He left her standing at the window, staring out at a city that kept moving forward while she remained frozen in a moment 5 years past. But Brennan's troubles were far from over. 3 days later, a colleague named Preston Kincaid cornered him in the break room. Preston was 38, ambitious, and had competed with Brennan for every promotion since they both joined the firm. He smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Heard about your little situation with Vivian," Preston said. "Quite the scandal. Single father gets threatened by CEO after hours. If that got out to the press, it could destroy what's left of this company. There's nothing to get out. She resigned. It's handled." "Is it?" Preston leaned against the counter, blocking the only exit. "You know what I think? I think you used your sob story about your sick kid to get special treatment. Flexible hours, deadline extensions, the good projects. And when Vivian finally called you out, you played victim. That's not what happened. Doesn't matter what happened. Matters what people believe." Preston's smile widened. "Genevieve might be protecting you now, but she's 68 years old. She won't be around forever. And I have a very long memory, Calloway." The threat hung in the air as Preston walked away, whistling. But amid the darkness, light emerged from an unexpected source. Dr. Marlo Sinclair had been Lily Rose's specialist for 2 years. At 29, she was young for her position, but brilliant in ways that transcended age. She had a gift for explaining complex medical issues in terms that made even an 8-year-old understand and feel empowered rather than afraid. "Good news," Marlo said during Rosie's next checkup, her warm eyes crinkling with genuine joy. "The new treatment protocol is working. Her kidney function has actually improved for the first time in 18 months. Brennan exhaled relief he hadn't known he was holding. "There's something else." Marlo hesitated, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "The hospital is partnering with a research foundation for pediatric autoimmune diseases. They're looking for patient advocates, children who can speak about their experiences. You want Rosie to speak publicly? Only if she's comfortable, and only with your permission." Marlo's gaze held his steadily. "I've watched her for 2 years, Mr. Calloway. She's remarkable. The way she explains her condition to other kids in the ward, the way she comforts children who are scared, she has a gift." Rosie, sitting on the exam table, had been listening with the intensity she brought to everything. "Would it help other kids like me?" she asked. "It might," Marlo answered honestly. "The people who fund this research need to see the human faces behind the numbers. Your story could open doors." "Then I want to do it." Rosie looked at her father with eyes far too old for her face. "Ms. Patterson says our stories have power. Maybe my story can help someone." Over the following weeks, Brennan found himself spending more time at the hospital than strictly necessary. He told himself it was for Rosie, for the advocacy program they were building together. But increasingly, he recognized a different truth. Marlo Sinclair had become the brightest part of his days. They worked late together, reviewing research proposals and planning the upcoming foundation gala. They shared coffee in the hospital cafeteria, conversations stretching from medicine into books, music, dreams they had almost forgotten they harbored. One night, after a particularly long session, Marlo looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Anything." "How do you do it?" "Single father, demanding job, daughter with a serious illness. Most people would have crumbled under half that weight." Brennan considered the question, really considered it, for the first time in years. "I almost did crumble. When Thea left, my ex-wife, I couldn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. Ren moved in just to make sure Rosie got fed and made it to school." "What changed?" "Rosie asked me one morning if I was going to leave too." The memory still cut. She was 5. She had already figured out that people leave when things get hard. I promised her right then that I would never stop fighting. Not for her, not for us. Marlo reached across the table and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip steady. "That's the most beautiful and heartbreaking thing I've ever heard." "What about you? Why pediatric medicine?" Her expression flickered with old pain. "My brother had leukemia as a child. The doctors who treated him became our family's anchors. I wanted to be that for other families. Did he survive? He's 32 now, married with 2 kids, and absolutely insufferable about it. She laughed, and the sound was like light breaking through clouds. But for years, we didn't know if he'd make it. I remember what that fear feels like. I never want another family to face it alone. Brennan looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who understood. Someone who had walked through fire and emerged determined to help others through their own flames. Dr. Sinclair, he started. Marlowe, please. I think we're past formality. Marlowe, he turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. I'm not very good at this. I haven't been good at it for a long time. But I think maybe if you're willing. Yes, she said before he could fumble his way to the end of the sentence. Whatever you're trying to ask, yes. Rosie, perceptive as always, noticed the change immediately. Daddy, she said one evening, studying him with her head tilted like a curious bird. Do you like Dr. Marlowe? Brennan hesitated. She's been very helpful with your treatment. That's not what I mean. Rosie's eyes were ancient with understanding. You smile different when she's around, like the clouds went away. Would that bother you if I like someone? Rosie considered the question with the gravity it deserved. Mommy left because I was sick. She couldn't handle it. But Dr. Marlowe fights to make sick kids better. That's the opposite. She paused. Dr. Marlowe would be a good mom. She knows how to make the hospital less scary. And she always explains things so I understand. And she looks at you like you're her favorite person. That's important. Brennan pulled his daughter into a gentle hug, marveling at her wisdom. When did you get so smart, Rosebud? Probably when I turned 8. 8 is very wise. But happiness, Brennan had learned, was always the precursor to disaster. The doorbell rang one evening, shattering the peaceful quiet. Standing on his doorstep was a woman he hadn't seen in 3 years, a woman he had hoped never to see again. Theodora looked different, polished in ways she never had been during their marriage. Expensive clothes, professional highlights, a massive diamond ring glinting on her finger. Brennan, we need to talk about Lily Rose. You don't get to call her that. His voice was ice. You gave up that right when you left a note on the kitchen counter and disappeared. I was sick, Brennan. Postpartum depression that went untreated for years. I've gotten help. I've gotten better. She held up the ring. I'm remarried now. My husband is a partner at Morrison and Drake. Morrison and Drake, one of Chicago's most powerful law firms. The name landed like a threat. Good for you. What does that have to do with us? I want to be part of Rosie's life again, and if you won't let me willingly, we'll let the courts decide. Brennan felt ice crystallize in his veins. You signed away your parental rights. I signed under duress. My lawyer says there's precedent to challenge that, especially given your circumstances. She glanced past him into the modest apartment. A maintenance worker's salary, a daughter with a chronic illness, a girlfriend you've known for what? A few weeks? Is this really the stable environment Rosie needs? Get out. Think about it, Brennan. I can give her resources, stability, a real family. All you have to do is share custody. We can be reasonable about this. There is nothing reasonable about a woman who abandoned her sick child coming back 3 years later to claim her like property. Thea's expression hardened. I'm trying to do this the nice way, but if you force me to get ugly, I will. And I have much better lawyers than you could ever afford. She walked away, leaving Brennan trembling in his doorway. The conspiracy revealed itself piece by piece over the following weeks. Marlowe's brother-in-law worked in family court and shared what he could without violating ethics. Thea's case was weak. Parents who terminated rights almost never won them back. But weak cases could still cause damage, could still drain resources, could still traumatize a child caught in the crossfire. Then Wren, using her professional network, discovered something worse. Preston Kincaid contacted Thea before she showed up at your door, Wren said, her face pale with anger. He reached out to her first, told her about Rosie's medical situation, suggested she could rescue her daughter from an unstable home. He manufactured this entire thing. It gets worse. He's been documenting everything he can use against you. Manipulated timesheets, exaggerated complaints, photographs from the night at Obsidian Lounge that he paid the bartender to take. Brennan stared at his sister, the full scope of the betrayal washing over him. "We need Vivian," Marlowe said when he told her. "She's the only one who can counter whatever story Preston creates about that night. She's in recovery. She's trying to rebuild her life. I can't ask her to relive the worst night of her year just to save me." Marlowe took his hands in hers, her gaze steady and certain. "You might have to. For Rosie." 3 months had passed since Vivian's resignation. She was living quietly now, attending AA meetings every day, volunteering at a grief counseling center downtown, rebuilding herself brick by patient brick. When Brennan appeared at her door, she looked healthier than he had ever seen her. The haunted shadows had retreated from her eyes. She stood straighter, breathed easier. But when she saw his face, she knew. "What's happened?" He told her everything. Thea's return, Preston's vendetta, the custody threat looming over his daughter's head like a guillotine. Vivian listened without interruption. When he finished, her expression was unreadable. "Preston Kincaid," she said finally. "I always knew he was ambitious. I didn't realize he was cruel. Will you help me? A statement clarifying what happened that night would undermine everything he's building." "I'll do more than that." Something of her old steel crept back into her voice. "I'll testify in person if it comes to court. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what happened and why." "Why would you do that? After I refused to forgive you?" Vivian smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "Because forgiveness isn't something you owe me, Brennan. It's something I have to earn. And maybe helping your daughter keep her father is the first step." Vivian proved to be a formidable ally. She reached out to her mother, and Genevieve activated her network with ruthless efficiency. Within weeks, they had assembled a dossier of Preston's manipulations, falsified documents, bribed employees, a pattern of sabotage stretching back years. "He's been undermining other colleagues too," Genevieve reported. "Anyone he perceived as competition. You're just his latest target." The Hartwell Foundation Gala for Pediatric Research was scheduled for the first Saturday in December. 300 of Chicago's elite would gather to support childhood autoimmune research. Rosie was scheduled to speak, and unknown to most attendees, it would also become a reckoning. The night arrived wrapped in early winter's first snowfall. The venue glittered with 10,000 tiny lights, and Chicago's most powerful citizens mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing like water. Preston was there, confident in his schemes, working the room with practiced charm. Thea arrived on her new husband's arm, dressed in couture, diamond ring flashing with every gesture. And at the center of it all stood an 8-year-old girl in a constellation print dress, ready to change everything. "Nervous?" Brennan asked, kneeling beside his daughter backstage. "A little. The excited kind. You know tonight isn't just about your speech, right? There might be some difficult conversations." Rosie nodded with her customary gravity. "I know. Mommy's here. The bad man from your work is here." She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much and understood more than any child should. "But we have our team, right? You and me and Aunt Wren and Dr. Marlowe and Mrs. Vivian." "That's right, Rosie Bud. Our team." "Then we'll be okay." She squeezed his hand. "Ms. Patterson says battles are won before they start, by choosing the right people to stand with you." Midway through the evening, Preston made his move. He approached Theo in full view of a dozen influential guests, speaking just loudly enough to be overheard. I have documentation of Mr. Calloway's workplace harassment, his financial irresponsibility, his pattern of using his daughter's illness to manipulate colleagues. Is this really the man who should have sole custody of a vulnerable child? The guest shifted uncomfortably, sensing blood in the water. That's quite enough. Vivian stepped forward from the crowd, champagne glass in hand, every inch the CEO she had once been. I know exactly what you're doing, Preston. I've known for weeks. She turned to address the gathered audience. Every piece of evidence Mr. Kincaid has presented is fabricated. I should know. I'm the woman he claims Mr. Calloway harassed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. What actually happened, Vivian continued, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom, is that 3 months ago, on the anniversary of my family's death, I drank too much and made an inappropriate demand of an employee who refused, who maintained his integrity, who rushed home to care for his sick daughter rather than compromise his values. She looked directly at Thea. I understand you're hoping to regain custody of your daughter, Miss Morrison. I want you to know something. In 20 years of running my company, I never saw a father more devoted than Brennan Calloway. When I threatened his career, when I gave him an impossible choice between his job and his integrity, he didn't hesitate. He chose his principles. He chose his daughter. Vivian paused. That's the kind of man Lily Rose deserves to be raised by. A man who does the right thing even when it costs him everything. Genevieve stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. There's one more matter to address. Mr. Kincaid, your employment at Hartwell and Associates is terminated effective immediately. Our legal team has also contacted the State Bar Association regarding your collusion with Ms. Morrison to file fraudulent custody claims. Preston's face went white. You can't do this. I already have. Security will escort you out. As Preston was led away, sputtering threats no one was listening to, the attention turned to Thea. She stood frozen, her carefully constructed plans crumbling around her, her new husband looking at her with the dawning horror of a man who had been deceived. I think, Genevieve said coolly, that concludes the evening's unexpected business. Now we have a very special young lady waiting to speak to us about something far more important than petty schemes and wounded egos. The stage lights shifted, and Rosie walked to the podium. A hush fell over 300 people as they watched the small figure in her starlight dress adjust the microphone. My name is Lily Rose Calloway, she began, her voice clear and steady, and my body gets confused sometimes. She explained her condition in her own words, how her immune system thought parts of her were enemies and attacked them, how she got tired easily and sometimes her joints hurt so much she couldn't hold a crayon, how she spent more time in hospitals than most kids spent at summer camp. But she didn't dwell in the darkness. People ask if I'm sad about being sick. Sometimes I am, but mostly I'm lucky. She found her father in the crowd. I'm lucky because my daddy never left. When my mommy decided she couldn't stay, my daddy stayed harder. He works and he cooks and he reads me stories, and he never ever makes me feel like I'm too much trouble. Her gaze shifted to Marlowe. I'm lucky because there are doctors like Dr. Marlowe who fight for kids like me, who make the hospital less scary, who explain things so we understand what's happening in our own bodies. Then, unexpectedly, she looked at Vivian. And I'm lucky because sometimes people who seem scary are just sad people who forgot how to hope. And when they remember how, they can do amazing things. Finally, she addressed the crowd. The money you give tonight helps scientists make better medicine. Maybe someday, no kid will have to be confused the way my body is confused. But until then, I want you to know something. She stood as tall as her 8-year-old frame would allow. Being sick doesn't make us less. It makes us different. And different people see things others miss. We know that time matters because we spent so much of ours waiting. We know that love is a choice you make every single day because we've watched people choose whether to stay or go. We know that family isn't about blood or legal papers. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who stays. Her voice strengthened with each word. I'm not just a sick kid. I'm brave and curious and pretty good at math and really good at making people laugh when they're scared. My daddy says I have a gift for seeing people, for knowing what they need. She smiled and it lit up the room. So here's what I see tonight. I see a room full of people who can help kids like me get better, who can fund the research that might mean someday I wake up and my body isn't confused anymore. Who can be part of our team? She gripped the podium with both hands. My favorite teacher, Ms. Patterson, says everyone has a story that matters. Tonight, I told you mine. Now I'm asking you to help write the next chapter. Not just for me, for all the kids whose bodies are fighting battles they didn't choose. 300 people rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, overwhelming, a wave of sound that washed over the small girl at the podium. Brennan was crying. Marlo was crying. Even Vivian, standing at the back of the room, wiped tears from her eyes. The gala raised $2.3 million that night, more than double the original goal. But more importantly, it brought together a community that would continue supporting pediatric research for years to come. 2 weeks later, Preston Kincaid was arrested for fraud and conspiracy. His legal career was over. Thea's custody petition was dismissed before it ever reached court. The judge noted her documented pattern of abandonment and subsequent bad faith manipulation. She was granted no visitation rights unless and until Rosie herself, as an adult, chose to pursue a relationship. Vivian continued her recovery, eventually joining the foundation's board of directors. Her first major initiative was establishing grief counseling services for parents of chronically ill children, funded by a substantial personal donation. And Brennan, after years of surviving, finally began to live. 1 year later, the park was their favorite place, the one with the duck pond and the ancient oak trees, where Rosie had learned to feed the birds and count the clouds. She ran ahead now, chasing a particularly brave squirrel, her laughter echoing across the water. Brennan sat on their usual bench, but he wasn't alone anymore. Marlo sat beside him, a ring glinting on her finger. They had married 3 months ago, a small ceremony in Wren's backyard, with fairy lights strung through the trees. Rosie had been the flower girl, scattering petals with solemn concentration, then breaking into a victory dance at the altar. She's so strong, Marlo said, watching Rosie. I remember the first time I saw her chart, all those numbers, all those challenges. I wondered how any child could carry so much. She doesn't carry it alone anymore. Brennan took her hand. Neither do I. Rosie came running back, dramatically throwing herself onto the bench between them. I'm absolutely starving. Can we get ice cream? It's 40 degrees outside. So? Ice cream doesn't check the weather. Marlo laughed. She's got you there. As they walked toward the ice cream cart, Rosie in the middle holding both their hands, she looked up at Brennan with those ancient eyes. Daddy? Yes, Rosie Bud. Remember when you told me we're better than superheroes because our power is love? I remember. I think I really understand now. She swung their hands higher, her steps bouncing with joy. Love isn't magic that fixes everything. It's choosing to try again tomorrow. Even when today was really, really hard. Brennan squeezed her hand, his throat tight with emotion. When did you get so wise? I'm almost 9 now. That's basically ancient. Marlo laughed again, and the sound mixed with Rosie's giggles, with the wind through bare branches, with the distant call of ducks on the winter pond. Brennan looked at his daughter, healthy and thriving, at his wife, brilliant and kind and exactly the partner he had needed without knowing it, at the life he had almost lost, rebuilt into something stronger and more beautiful than before. The anniversary would come again. Every year it would come. Vivian would light a candle for Jonathan and Emmy. Brennan would remember the night that nearly broke him. The scars would never fully fade, but scars were just proof of survival, evidence that the wound had healed. They got their ice cream, chocolate for Rosie, vanilla for Marlowe, coffee for Brennan. They sat on a bench and watched the winter sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Daddy," Rosie said, ice cream already smeared on her chin. "Yes? I'm really glad you stayed." Brennan pulled her close, pressed a kiss to the top of her head, and felt Marlowe's hand find his. "Me too, Rosebud. Me too." The sun set over Chicago, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, the ghosts of the past finally found their rest. What remained was the present, bright and imperfect, and infinitely precious. What remained was family. What remained was love.